20 minutes, which includes the opening and closing remarks by the chair and moderator, presentation, addresses, discussions with all our eminent speakers, and in the end, we will have question and answer session if the time permits. With those words, I hand over to our chair and moderator, Dr. B.S. Hegde. Sir, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the Master of Events for having nicely introduced all of us. Ever since, government announced the reforms to space sector about 3 years ago on inviting more and more participation from industry in all space sector activities in the country, how we do it, what we do, for industry to take more active role has been a buzz kind of feeling, most discussed, most talked about. And especially in this hall, where policy-related issues or sessions only are planned, I've been sitting all the time here, and I feel probably what we are going to discuss, a good bit of that is covered, how we make industry participation happen more. So the focus is on, really making the participation of industries work in the country, our Indian space program in the coming years, where industries will do probably total end-to-end manufacturing. We will have a robust ecosystem where industries, along with industries, work together. Industries with government will work together, and in that process we will not only strengthen country space program, but create employment opportunities, foster innovation, and ultimately become a part of the global space industry ecosystem. So I welcome our distinguished panelists from this side, Mr. Laxmesh, who heads the Space and Missiles Division in L&T, extremely important key position. You are aware that our flagship launcher, our means India's or ISRO's flagship launcher, PSLV, is now being manufactured by consortium, and he heads that important activity as far as space activities are concerned. That is besides, of course, his engagements with respect to missiles. And we have Dr. Govindarajan. I don't have to take extra pains to introduce him. I will request, of course, each of the distinguished panelists to tell a couple of words about themselves before they make their remarks. So then we have Mr. Krishna Reddy, who is with SatSure, an important initiative of providing us a ready inventory on what is available where, because the space ecosystem today, or space industry today, is going heavily supply chain driven activity, because the days are gone where one space agency will start with the components and ultimately realize a system and fly. Those days are gone. Today it's all supply chain based, so it's an important thing. And we have Mr. Samit, who will give us more inputs on the policy perspective, and what kind of things are needed. So I will only make a few general remarks, not talking much about statistics, which are readily available in various authentic sources, whether Brightspace or NSR or Euroconsult. In fact, the first day, our friend from Euroconsult gave such a nice perspective and listed out 7 areas fully illustrated with statistics and examples where the space program around the world should be going about, or how it stands today. So that gives us a clear track as to what are the opportunities. Now, what we discuss is, what we focus, if all distinguished panelists agree, how can India's space capabilities be enhanced or industrialized with a clear focus on, say, indigenous manufacturing, and technology development, and ultimately resulting into our building together a robust ecosystem of industries and companies that contribute to space missions which strengthen India's space program, or Atmanirbhar Bharat, as His Excellency told this morning, create a lot of employment opportunities because we have the largest number of youth in the world, and we foster innovation, and end of the day, we have to contribute to economic growth of the country. And of course, space economy, as we hear, by 2040 is slated to be around 1 trillion, and today stands around, say, 450, 460, 500, all figures, but definitely around 500 billion globally. By 2040, it is envisaged to be doubled, and that is the time we should aim to clinch a good share of that. Now, to industrialize India's space capabilities, several steps can be taken. So, in fact, it is not that I had all the tacit knowledge. I Googled, looked into the space policy. Almost all space policies available for countries across the world, I downloaded, went through them, and how did they really foster the growth of industry into space ecosystem over the years, I tried to summarize. See, one thing is, if you take the case of US, in the last 10 to 15 years, they have 7 to 8 discrete policies which they have put in place, many of them with the seal of the White House, which just proliferates like anything. See, policy and regulatory framework is most important for industry to grow and take active part. So we have to have a favorable policy, regulatory framework, which encourages private sector participation, promotes investment, and fosters innovation. The framework should provide clarity, lots of clarity actually, stability, and incentive for the companies to engage in space activities. See, unless you incentivize them, they won't come forward, because for years we have been telling space is a, capital incentive, low volume industry. The scenario is changing now, but then still government has to have a program to incentivize industry to come and get into space wholeheartedly. Skill development is most important, because every educational institution, every educational course should start teaching space. What it can do for society, what it can do for technology, in every respect. So skill development and education should be emphasized. It should be built into all kinds of curricula appropriately. Now, since, you see, space programs all over the world have started by various governments only as national program, governmental program. Over a period of time, they have roped in more and more industry. So government has to have adequate incubators set up for startups to, easily access, any startup which starts a company today, or youngsters who come out of the college with a lot of hopes, they are not expected to be setting up, all kinds of test facilities, all kinds of... So there should be that kind of facilities set up by the government, which should be made accessible by these startups easily. And incentives and grants is a must. See, actually the Europe model, they started really encouraging the universities, educational institutions, through announcement of opportunities, through small funding. So in the process, really it became, quite convenient for them, because a lot of innovations, newer technologies came out of Europe, but then they didn't multiply or capitalize it. Maybe the US guys, the typical entrepreneurial mode, they took over and started enhancing the numbers of each product. So technology transfer and transfer of IP is yet another important step in roping in more and more industry. In fact, this is one thing heavily debated, I know, even within ISRO, but I am of the strong opinion that since all technologies we have developed at the cost of taxpayers' money, it should be made available to multiple people who are interested to take space technology, because in the last few years, my post-retirement in 2021, because I had a long innings in ISRO, more than 4.5 decades. But when I came out, of course, even within ISRO, I was interacting with the industry. Technology transfer, you see, even if we transfer all the technology of subsystems and systems to industries today, it is difficult. Many of the technologies related to our subsystems may or may not find market elsewhere. And no industry can come forward and take our technology, only trusting that ISRO will buy back from me. It will not work out. So our technology should be transferred to industries, and we should handhold, we means ISRO should handhold Indian industry and develop it further and make it compatible or contemporary with equivalent global systems. Then only we can enter global markets. See, today in the supply chain, hopefully Krishna will tell that, there are hardly any Indian product in this SatSure database, which can go global. So that's an important step. Then we should have appropriate export promotion policies, hoping that ISRO or hoping that Indian industry produced space product is capable of finding market outside. There shouldn't be much of hassles for industry to export. So single window or ease of doing business, whatever you tell, would be fine. Then, of course, outreach and awareness program. So with all these, now where do we really stand? I mean, last two sentences from me. See, today, globally, there are about 10,500 much recognized space industries are said to be, okay? These are all from the authentic databases. And out of these 10,500 industries globally, 52% of them, nearly 5,600, are in the United States. Of course, we should also appreciate that their annual space budget is more than 40 billion, okay? And the immediate next is UK, which has got about 612, 20 industries. Now, China, Germany, Canada, Japan, all are in the 3 to 4% of these 10,500 odd industries which are recognized globally. Now, US space budget is about 40 billion, and we are, much less, because China, of course, has a larger space budget, but still 2.7% of global industry, private industry, is supposed to be working in the Chinese space program. So, obvious that India's space budget should be enhanced for about 1.4 billion to a sizable thing. Otherwise, expecting that we will become soon a recognizable part of the trillion-dollar economy, space economy, will be a myth. Because everywhere, government is anchor customer, in US or Europe or wherever. See, in Europe till recent, the European governments had certain percent of share in European space industries. Recently, they have made space industries independent, even Airbus, Thales Alenia, and all that. In US, government supports all industries with advanced, huge orders, whether it is SpaceX, Capella, Maxar, or Hawkeye, anybody. And the last important thing is, I find a bit of hesitation or taboo in India, the civilian space program, the strategic space program. So according to me, they are not yet coming to the same table. But as far as industry is concerned, it shouldn't make any difference, because everywhere else, the civilian and defense space needs are integrated. Only at the final level of using them, they get bifurcated. Because in the first session I heard, if an industry designs a satellite, my in-space friend told that, that design has to be seen carefully. And really we can't see now. Because as I told you, since putting up a spacecraft together today is a supply chain based activity, one cannot split or break the subsystem and start seeing all that. And what is built into the chip or embedded system, it's very difficult to see. See, we should be practical. If we start with this kind of taboo, it will become extremely difficult. And I think with this note, I will request our distinguished panelists to make their remarks and, about 8 to 10 minutes or whatever. And since it is a compact panel, we can also have a lot of participation from the distinguished participants. So I think with all your permission, I'll start with our friend, Mr. Laxmesh, who flew in this morning from Coimbatore. We were worried whether he would come. So my request is first tell a couple of things about what your industry and about your industry, what you're doing, and then the perspectives.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. And big thanks to Anil and Rajiv for giving the opportunity to be here today. And certainly in a panel that's moderated by our guru, Dr. Hegde, who has also been one of the founders and has been part of the building the space agenda for the country. So thank you very much, sir. It's really an honor to be on the panel being moderated by you. I'm Laxmesh. I head the missiles and aerospace business at Larsen & Toubro. Larsen & Toubro is, of course, a $23 billion Indian multinational across construction, EPC, high-tech manufacturing, and services, and the largest Indian private company in the sectors of defense and aerospace. Specifically, the business which I handle is anything that takes flight. So aerospace is a very essential part of that. And as Dr. Hegde mentioned, the latest one being the PSLV integration. But however, we've been part of the ISRO space agenda right from the very first launch. And as Larsen & Toubro, we've been in every launch vehicle and every satellite. There's been something or the other that has gone from Larsen & Toubro. And as it's on an increase to an extent now that we have come to do a complete integration of launch vehicle. So that's been the kind of journey that Larsen & Toubro has had so far with space, with ISRO and likes of Dr. Hegde. How one very important thing is, Larsen & Toubro is such a large company and space has been such a very small part of that. It's very important to really understand why a company like Larsen & Toubro has stayed put in a very small segment, economic segment. For two main reasons. One, the kind of technological advancements or the exposure the space industry has given us, we have been able to kind of use that and spin it off into bigger businesses in other sectors. And that's really helped. Number two, Larsen & Toubro is a nation-building company, and therefore we just cannot not afford to be in this critical sector. The time is now for industrializing this sector. Now, before I get to the industrialization, I just want to capture my own views on what is industrialization. There's one technical aspect of industrialization, and I think there is another important aspect as industrialization to me means to make a sector economically significant. And therefore, it is a national agenda. Industrialization to me means to actually build the demand, build the market so that the economy of that particular sector grows up. Industrialization, according to me, is all about extensively reorganizing the sector and those which help in building the sector and kind of ironing out the challenges which are inhibiting the growth of the sector. So these are three main agendas. Now when it comes to the various elements of industrialization, as I said, to make it economically significant, that means fundamentally we are talking about what has been a technological fantasy. We need to convert it into a truly industrial grade economic contributor. So specific to the space sector, I see that there are about 7 or 8 dimensions on this. One is, of course, what's lot being done is the policies and the push and the reforms from the country. Number 2 is about the technology intensive sector. Third vital is capital. Capital is a means and capital is also an end. So therefore, it needs to be a means. And in a sector where it is capital intensive, the returns are, the gestation periods are longer. And very important is there must be a failure tolerance built into capital management in this particular sector. The sector is very sensitive. Any small thing that happens captures the headlines, and therefore it needs to be dealt with acute sensitivity. The third and very important aspect of industrialization is resources. Now, resources right from raw material to machineries to infrastructure, all of that I put under resources, and today the biggest and the essential part of industrializing this sector in this country is that. The next is knowledge workforce, skill workforce. The role of aerospace engineering, systems engineering, and the way the academia is now shaping up to include space as a mainstream is a very positive thing. It's only happening now. Otherwise, people would get into the space sector morally driven by the passion and the basic sciences which they have gone through in their engineering. I think the last couple of things which essentially makes an industrialization happen are standards and systems. India must come up with its own aerospace standard, wherein which we do very clearly, we are talking about a human space standard, certification standard. I think it is essential that we come with our own aerospace standard and systems for evaluating, qualifying, enrolling people and building the value chain according to that. The last and probably the most important part of any industrialization is the ecosystem. An ecosystem has all the elements of the value chain in it, right from the designers to the system integrators to the tier ones to the logistic companies to investors to testing facilities, and practically all of them need to be knit together in one, as if they're part of one small industrial village. Which means, now to build an ecosystem which is partnered by multiple organizations who have their own purposes of existence. Now, if we need to kind of align them into a well-oiled ecosystem, that means it is essential that we unite them at the purpose level. And that's how we need to drive the industrialization of the space sector in this country. And as Larsen and Toubro and I myself, that's something which is on the topmost agenda for us. Thank you.
Thank you for those extremely valuable points. I fully agree on the last one, of course. I agree with everything, but last one, I want to add one point. You know, just around 2010, 2011 time frame, when UK wanted to convert the British National Space Centre, BNSC, into UK Space Agency, the Minister for Space, Lord David Willett, he had come to ISRO, and I understand he went around some other space agencies to study the model. And when he came to ISRO, I had the privilege of taking him to show our satellite center, eyesight and all. He said, no, we are not going to do any such thing like you guys, because you have built too much of facility within the government. Our first priority is to make a most workable space policy. We will set up UK Space Center. Starting point would be space policy. And we will make the space policy such that industries from all over Europe will be able to comfortably come to UK and set up their industries. But we will provide for infrastructure. We will see that the ecosystem grows. And today, Harwell is a testimony for that. And they have the Harwell marketing team, Catapult, you know, who came last year. So, I mean, if one starts with a clear-cut directive, it's much better. And Australia is starting same way. But Australia, the government is investing the money for industries to do space activity with a condition that some 70 or 75% of the investment should happen within Australia. 25% you go for partnerships. So, I mean, if you start with that clear cut, but then India has chosen to probably work like what US did in the beginning. You know, we started totally governmental space program and we kept it slightly longer with the government, to be honest, which we all see today. Maybe we are slow by 10, 15 years too. So I think as we move along, things should fall in place, but then it should go at really quick pace, as His Excellency also pointed out this morning. I think with this I will request Dr. Govindarajan to give his views on the whole topic. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. As Mr. Laxmesh mentioned, when a person like Dr. Hegde is moderating, it becomes easier for us because he not only guides us and he really runs the panel, navigates the panel very well. So thank you, sir. As we have been hearing, the space sector is generally dominated by government, it said, world over. But in 2022, I think out about 178 missions that happened, 90 were from private sector. And out of that 90, about 61, I think, is from SpaceX. Point is, that means nearly 50% of the space missions that happened last year were contributed by private sector. That means the shift is happening from government to private, which should be an encouragement for the private industries to plunge into space sector. When it comes to industrialization, I think what we need to look at, I generally talk about the basics. Basics is this architecture. If we really talk about space architecture, we have to see who are the players in that architecture. Players obviously will be the government, the industries, service providers, regulators, policymakers. If we all agree that they're all players in that architecture, obviously all the players have to participate. When I say that they have to participate means we cannot say that you do it, everybody should say that I will do it. So if in an industrialization, the policy also, as we have been talking, plays an important role. But in my opinion, who makes the policy? The government, obviously. The private industry, they always contribute towards the making of the policy. At the end of the day, somebody will take the decision and make the policy. In my opinion, policy only exhibits the mindset of the government towards that sector. It is the responsibility of the other players in that architecture or the ecosystem to implement that policy, to see that it benefits everybody. I cannot say that it only should benefit me. It should benefit everybody. As part of the industrialization, the industry also, in my opinion, had to take risk because they are going to get the rewards. Risk and reward go together. Meaning, of course, they are putting the capital and also they create resources, make use of the resources that are already available created by ISRO and other agencies. They also have to think long term. See, when we want, for example, in India, ISRO moving from all the activities of the space to, let's assume, the research only, that means the responsibility will shift from ISRO to private industries. When that shift happens, the private industries will have additional responsibility of doing certain things what hitherto were being done by ISRO. Means you again be responsible to create an ecosystem. Like, for example, if I want to start an industry or the country want to start an industry, we want good manpower, as he said, skill sets. So skill set will not just happen overnight. That means we have to really work towards creating that skill set and also bridge the gap between academia and industry requirements. That means we also have to, like how we expect the government to come out with a policy, industry also should come out with a policy as to how they participate and be responsible in creating that ecosystem that helps industry only. So the other things, of course, we have been talking about the logistics, supply chain, the export promotion, things like that. They're all part of the ecosystem. Obviously, the government should really look into this and create that environment for the industry to plunge. As we have been seeing that there are 150 or 200 startups that have come up, because for youngsters, they will start the startup to convert their ideas into implementation. But they also look at the end of the day, even startup have to make money, have to make their product see the end of the road and make that business sense. How it happens? They have to go to the industry. That means startup also should think right from the beginning as to how they can participate in the industrialization of the space sector. So that means when I mentioned in the beginning about the architecture, in that architecture, if you really put various players, and various players have to participate. So this is very important. When I use the word participation, participation is very important. That means while you participate, you be passionate about that and take the responsibility and, of course, accountability also for the execution. So even the startups also, as they mature, not in the beginning, they also have to participate in that space architecture and work towards industrialization of till now we were only looking at ISRO because they were the only player, so you praise or blame ISRO for everything. So now, when the shift happens, the responsibility also should happen for the good industrial environment in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Govindarajan. Now I will request our young friend Krishna Reddy to talk about himself first in a sentence or two and activities of SatSure and on the topic. And it is by choice I wanted you to talk at the last because you are a public policy specialist. How all these remarks will fit into policy framework and governmental affairs and all. I thought you could talk the last among the panel. Really? Wow. You please. Yeah, Krishna Reddy.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you, SIA, for giving me this opportunity to be on the panel among the stalwarts of the Indian and global industry. And as Dr. Hegde mentioned, my name is Krishna, and I'm leading the marketing and strategy at SatSure. But at the same time, for half a decade, I've been a strong space policy advocate. And I was looking forward to this panel because for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been trying to push out the perspective of how manufacturing is the need of the hour for the Indian and the global space industry. So I like to go a little back, like centuries back. So the communication a few centuries ago used to happen through messengers or letters. Now it's going towards the satellite in the orbit. Your survey used to happen through balloons. Now it's going again to satellite. And in the coming year, this internet would also be via satellites. So what does it say? It says that the 3 aspects of securing national interest, observing and connecting people, the 3 major aspects are going to the space. And with this, the space is we are moving towards land-based resource institution to a space-based resource institution. And as the number suggests by some reports, in the coming years, there will be, the satellite launches will be about 1,000 annually. And these are going towards LEO and very low Earth orbit. The satellite's lifespan will be around 3.5 to 4 years. So it means that a company will have 4 years to do R&D and request for manufacturing to develop an advanced version of the existing constellation. And going by this one company's requirement, there will be multiple other companies, which will then need a lot of manufacturing capabilities within a state. They would need a testing facility. They would need manufacturing facility. They would also need companies building electronic components, their propulsion. And further, they will also need, all this institution will need human resources. It comes down to, institution producing such talents to cater to this requirement. So having said that, this will also require a certain aspect of having a policy that will shape up the entire industry in the orbit. Going forward, when we have multiple satellites in the orbit, we will also need certain, collision avoidance module. Again, from a manufacturing capacity. It will lead to the emergence of new verticals like space insurance to a great extent. It will also lead to a certain strategic development because, see, the thing is, we are going towards a resourceful medium in space. There will be critical satellites important for a state to function. What happens when that particular satellite is out in the open? Countries today certain countries don't follow any rules, they will just have the clear aspect to take it down. So how do we secure our institution in space? Again, there will be a requirement of escort satellites. Again, a manufacturing demand. So the way we are moving towards orbit, there is certain shift from land towards the upwards. And all this requirement, like stalwarts, like the L&T would also literally lift all these weights from land to the orbit. And having said that, it's great that when I speak to people, when I speak to government industries, they're saying, yes, this is the way to go. And they're also looking forward to build such manufacturing capacity in India. And as going forward, the first thing that a country like India can do is have a centralized policy for space parks. Like we have SEZs, just like that a certain space park where they can call all the people, all the industry people to setting up AIT and like research institutes and everything within one within one cluster. This will just boost the indigenous manufacturing capability of India in this space segment. Not only that, it will also attract foreign investment in the state. Apart from that, it will also reduce a lot of logistical aspects for a company to build and launch their own satellites in the space. So there are certain interests that I'm also understanding from the panels, from the people here, and looking forward to see this coming out and most promising aspect through the policy. And having said that, look forward to listening to you and look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
So Samit, it's your turn now, please.
Dr. Hegde, good morning and nice to meet you again. Thank you very much for your opening comments. You covered a lot of ground. For introduction, I lead Raytheon Technologies in India. This is the world's largest aerospace and defense company. We specialize in jet engines, we specialize in spacecrafts, we specialize in everything that you see inside an aircraft, whether it is civil or military. We also specialize in ammunition, which is missiles, which will be music to my friend from L&T. So what we have realized is from an industrialization point of view, and particularly because we've seen the kind of friendship and kind of strategic partnership between two countries, United States and India. I was in the Prime Minister's last 2 weeks visit in the US. A very, very specific, strategic agreement has been reached between the two countries in collaboration. One of the sectors that we had seen was closely guarded between both countries, particularly the United States, was releasing any kind of technology outside the United States in the space sector. On the defense sector, we have been working with the US government to kind of ease out the ITAR restrictions, licensing restrictions, so that we can partner with Indian countries, Indian companies, and localize them in the country. We have done that to some extent. Some components have started to come in. We are further looking at expanding this relationship. As Raytheon Technologies, we were the first foreign OEM to start local manufacturing in India. I don't know how many of you are aware, the Sikorsky helicopter facility that we had a JV with Tata's in Hyderabad was really the first kind of an OEM-led defense manufacturing in the country. We subsequently sold Sikorsky to Lockheed Martin, but then we were the first companies to start manufacturing in the country for the simple reason we thought that on a longer trajectory, India gave us the best cost country advantages. India gave us the best labor, educated English-speaking graduates for a long, long time. And when we look at further localizing and further partnering with the Indian industry, Dr. Hegde, you'll be surprised to know India continues to be the best cost country. We have labor arbitrage, we have cost arbitrage, and we have a huge talent pool. I'll give you a simple example. We invested $250 million just about a few months back in manufacturing and engineering. Many of you would have heard the F-35 fighter jet, that United States flies. You'll be surprised to know that the fighter jet's cockpit partially is designed in Hyderabad by engineers, Indian engineers. The fighter jet's helmet, which has a visor, which has everything on the visor, is actually designed in India. And then we send it across to our Cedar Rapids facility in the United States for manufacturing. So the talent is there. Now, when we are venturing into the space sector, from a policy standpoint, I was involved in the space policy that came out very recently in giving inputs to the government, and we are further looking at how does that space policy engage the startups, engage the Indian ecosystem, engages the Indian industry. You made a very valid point. The startups would not have the bandwidth to hold on or run after government agencies. They will need funding, they will need hand-holding, and they will need a certain threshold and a guarantee that your funding is up to this limit. After that, this is the roadmap. Currently, in India, the problem with defense sector and aerospace sector, and now possibly with the space sector, is this. The government does not give any guarantee for buyback or buying. Which means if I'm an Indian industry wanting to invest in the space sector, there is absolutely zero guarantee that my investment is going to be giving me returns, because there is no guarantee of orders. In the United States, when we work with NASA, and we work with NASA, probably we've been working with them for the last 50 years, we have a roadmap of 20, 30, 40 years. We actually get a roadmap that these are the programs that NASA is looking at. They also give us funding, and we develop those programs. Many a times, those programs, while they are funded by the government, also has a guarantee tied up to it, that one, you will only supply to NASA. Second, you also rightly mentioned that probably 80% of that funding and investment has to be within the United States. Maybe it's time now for India to look at those kind of fundings. Department of Science and Technology can be a backup to this whole thing, and that's what we are trying to tell the government, that you need to provide funding for the research and development. If you want this ecosystem to come up, if you want our Indian industry to join the supply chain of global players like us maybe, they need to have a long tail of funding. Capital was mentioned. Capital is important. If you do not have capital, where is the private sector going to generate the fund from? By borrowing at 11%, 10% from the banks, and then run a business which doesn't give you a guarantee for business? That maths is not going to work out. So we are in talks with the government. There is a whole lot of committee members who are advising the government, and government is also interacting with the industry. We feel possibly that the startups probably should be insulated from the space sector at this point in time and not get exposed to the government machinery at this point in time until and unless they have absolute surety from the government that your whatever you design or whatever you come out with, there will be a way to feed it into the industry. There are ecosystems where in Telangana we have the T-hubs, wherein we engage with the startups and we give them a reverse challenge, which means that, for example, I have to develop a product. The product is already mature and developed, let's say a jet engine component or a spacecraft component. The challenge with me is that product is being manufactured in the United States or in a very high labor cost market at this point in time. Now, if I have to design something more superior, something more efficient, something more cost effective, we give the reverse auction to the startups that can you come out with a better design? Can you come out with a kind of a low cost, more efficient product design? And we guarantee that we'll pick it up from you. So we have engaged almost like 800 startups in that space, which gives the startups a kind of a roadmap and kind of a visibility that, okay, if I'm investing so much of money, I will not give you money. I will give you guarantee that if you win this contest, I'll pick it up. Now, government, through ISRO, can also devise a method as to how does those technology finds its way into the industry, and then from industry, it finds its way into the market. It doesn't have to be defense, it doesn't have to be aerospace, it can be agriculture, it can be health, it can be biotechnology, it can be anything. But private industry does not have unlimited wealth. Especially startups, they would not have the bandwidth to hold on to a 5-year period. They will run out of money. How are they going to sustain? So sustainment is the key in this case. I mean, in the space sector, because it is nascent, it is a long gestation period industry like the defense sector. Defense sector looks very attractive and looks very, very sexy, from the outside. But people who are L&Ts into defense, they will know that government contracts don't come easy. Government contracts don't come fast. They take a long, long time to mature. The payments take a long, long time to mature. You have to go through a long tail of qualifying procedures. Space would also be a similar, trajectory. Question now is, how do you sustain? One way of doing it, what we suggested to the government was get the big players involved. Get the big players involved, get the Indian industry to join the global supply chains. We are already supplying to the NASAs of the world, the UKs of the world, the Australias of the world, the Frances of the world. We have massive network. Like us, there would be hundreds of companies, European companies, American companies, who already have a 50-year roadmap to what programs they have to develop, how they have to develop, and when they have to deliver. That is the match that Prime Minister Modi tried to do in the United States when they got into this agreement that we will develop something jointly, and then will find its way into the industries of both the worlds, and how co-development, co-production can happen. It has a direct impact on employment. It has a direct impact on the economy of the country. And we said that India can provide you best cost. India can provide you possibly a trajectory where not only the designs can be more efficient, they can probably be more, I would say, cost effective. United States today is a $300 per hour industry, $300 per hour. India fully loaded is $40 per hour. Imagine. Even after 10 years, we won't be crossing $100 per hour. So we would have that advantage with us for the next 2 decades. And this is our chance. As Prime Minister Modi said in the United States, it is now that we have to take advantage of this. Space is definitely the sector that we should be looking at. And industries on both sides, the foreign OEMs, Indian industry and startups, we should be looking at working together and learn from each other and try to collaborate between ourselves. I'll end there, Dr. Hegde, if anything else you want to ask.
Thank you so much. I think, Samit, you made extremely valuable points. Yes, I mean, government is required to be an anchor customer of industry to buy back the products, or assure industry that go ahead, develop a product, certain numbers we will buy, we will take, some such thing is necessary. See, in US, we are all seeing that there is no taboo about private startup, there is no taboo going to industry. You see SpaceX, the life-saving grant, when 3 of Falcon 9, Falcon failed, and the life-saving grant was given by NASA as an advance contract, then only successes. And today, when a SpaceX launch takes place, SpaceX control room is different, and Johnson Space Center in Houston fully supports. We are all aware that the historic Cape Canaveral launch pad 39A and 40 are extensively used by SpaceX. Okay, whether it is for carrying a private astronaut, privately funded astronaut, or NASA astronaut, or from some other country. And of most recent, even for the Artemis or whatever, when US provided grants, they gave to 2, United Launch Alliance and SpaceX. The whole grant was split, I think, if I'm right, 3.5, 3.6 billion to SpaceX and little less to ULA, so that, you should always have a backup kind of activity. I'm not very sure about figures, but the largest of the contracts in recent times was split between 2 competent launch service providers. And you see, from nowhere, a company called Hawkeye came up, a 3U or 6U kind of satellite, mapping radio frequencies from all over the world. All radio frequency hotspots are monitored globally. With 12 satellites, they're monitoring the whole globe today, small ones. And probably one of the thickest user of that is US Defense today. If you are seeing the space news, you will see that the Space Command in US openly came out telling that we are trying to rework on our whole plan and go for using the privately owned small satellites for US defense purposes. Okay, this is all public domain info and not mine. So there is absolutely no taboo. You see, much before the first satellite of Capella, 1 meter or sub-meter level X-band SAR data went up. Payam Bazade is the founder, CEO. He was with JPL earlier, just a youngster, about 40-year-old guy. Before the first satellite went up, the largest order was placed with him from the US Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And the same is true with respect to Maxar data, Planet Aerospace data. So US government extensively buys. So, I mean, a startup or an entrepreneur can be far more sure in a situation like that. That even spotty machine, see, they have only one condition, that you first meet the requirements of the French defense forces, then you market the data outside France. So, I mean, with the permission from my friend, Mr. Laxmesh, you see, for him to win the PSLV manufacturing contract, I think he had to work and rework on his budget and ultimately be L1. No, I don't have any view or comment on this, because I worked 45 years in the government. If I were on the other side, yes, L1 is forced on us, lowest of the quotations. Because, you know, on taxpayers' money, any government agency has to be accountable. He is worried about, I am worried about CAG, I am worried about audit, I am worried about Public Accounts Committee, Parliamentary Committee. So there is no other way around. So as we move along, I think wishfully we must expect that we will come out of all this if we find that we want to make this company to deliver the product. We should give them not the least possible, we should give them little extra money. Government should find a way. Otherwise, in high technology area, slowly there is a fear that people will back out. All startups, if they come with a good product, they may be bought out by some US company or Europe company, we don't know. A lot of integration is happening in SATCOM area today. You know, every second day we read something about mergers, acquisitions, companies being acquired, bought over. So I think it is also necessary for India to keep not only develop our ecosystem, keep our ecosystem live and intact, at least for a decade and a half. I think with these remarks, we have a good 20 minutes to go. If you all agree, we'll open the floor to audience about 6 to 8. I mean, little sharp questions. And you kindly address it to any one of our panelists. That is okay? Yeah. Let's.
I'm Ramananda Sengupta from stratnewsglobal.com and interstellar.news. With your permission, Dr. Hegde, I'd like to ask two very brief questions. One is to you. When it comes to industrialization of space, are we benchmarking against any other country? And if yes, why is it that country? And the second one is to anybody who cares to answer. I've been hearing a lot about the ecosystem that we're building, but from what I understand, we have only 4 or 5 universities that actually offer degrees in space technology and space sciences. So where exactly is your talent pool coming from?
First question I didn't get correct, but thing is about, some time ago I was aware that more than 85 engineering colleges have aerospace course. A good number of universities teach, but whether they make the candidates industry ready, space industry ready or not, I'm not aware. But you see today, even in the IT sector, when TCS or Infosys or anybody goes for en masse recruitment, they put the new recruitees into some 3 months of training to fall in line with their activities. So eventually that kind of thing might be required. And now, of course, SIA in collaboration with some universities and NIAS are trying to promote an activity, a space research initiative. It's in very, very preliminary stages, I know, working. To see that, some industry-ready workforce will be created. I mean, promoting that activity, making some contents, but I think Mr. Laxmesh can throw more light on this because he has one of the flagship projects of the country in hand.
Yeah, I think I'll try to respond to the first question about benchmarking. Benchmarking is certainly a good thing. Now, whether you want to benchmark a country or look at the good parts of what different countries have done in their own space agenda and how they have kind of woven them into their country's agenda. I think India is also doing its own bit of space strategy and probably picking up the best of what has happened elsewhere, because if you look at the liberalization or the reforms in the space sector happened in India maybe, let us say, 2020 and 2023, but something of this has happened in US probably 15, 20 years back. And then the Europe happened, then China, there are a lot of things. There's enormous amount of learning that has come by the various countries which have gone ahead with liberalization of space. I think the space has been the last of the sectors in each country to liberalize. It's a good amount of learning there. And therefore, some of the institutional processes that has been set in India, I believe, are through the learnings which has come from various other countries. The second part is, yes, there is no specific stream at an engineering level, but however now IIT Mumbai, IIT Madras, of course the Indian Institute of Space Technology which is there at Trivandrum, and then there are about 3 or 4 other different universities, including some of the IITs, have come up with typical, a very specific space-based engineering, both as major as well as minor. So, and what Dr. Hegde mentioned about is how do we transform these the engineers into directly contributable employees of an organization. And that is where we today have enormous amount of relationship between academia and industry. And we are working on multiple joint programs wherein which we engage the youngsters or the students from colleges, both at undergrad level, graduation level, and very important thing is we also engage faculty. Because it's essential that we feel that the faculty who are teaching the youngsters must have an industry exposure themselves. Yeah. So that's actually the way we are trying to build the back of this. Thanks.
I hope it answers, because you see, when they bagged or they were about to bag the PSLV manufacturing contract L&T, they engaged a team of ISRO veterans and regular classes like scenario. Of course, it was pandemic time. Virtually, they had it conducted, where all those who are going to work on PSLV were at the other end as learners of what is required for. So that might be required.
Can I just add?
Yeah, please, yeah.
You're right. The engineering graduates who pass out from colleges may not be 100% employable. So you need to run bridge courses, and we as Ananth Technologies, we have a couple of world-class training centers in India, in Hyderabad. But at this point in time, they are pertaining to aerospace only. So we have live jet engines, wherein engineers, DGCA folks, airline pilots, we train them. But we also train aeronautical engineers who are finishing their colleges in various parts of the country. Because we realize that probably most of them have never seen a live jet engine or have gone inside a live jet engine to see how the construct is. So the knowledge that is imparted in the engineering colleges is largely theoretical, or possibly those engines which are 50, 60 years old, right? What we have done is we have kept live engines which are of the latest technologies, and engineers, pilots, people who maintain these engineers with the airlines, they are exposed to these engines live. So they come here for bridge courses, and it's like a finishing school. And when they go back with that certification, they are far more employable.
One point, yeah, okay, then we'll ask more questions.
Sure. Thank you. Speaking from a personal experience, during my graduation, in the mechanical engineering department, I had the opportunity to do an internship at gas turbine research establishment during my second year. So what it gave me an idea is that whatever I'm learning is way different than what I'm seeing in front of me. The telescopes, the SEM, the TEMs, we all talk about, right? When you read and when you see, it's completely different. And because rightly as pointed out Mr. Samit and Mr. Laxmesh, here that we need something like we have in the Western side or the European side, where we have industry and academic institution collaboration, where a student is given a certain amount of time to actually work hands-on on certain technologies and understand the implication of all the theoretical knowledge that he has garnered over the course of years. Having said that, it's great to see IIT Madras and IIT Bombay, as mentioned, certain institutes helping these young grads understand what is the reality when it comes to actually working on those technologies. And it is my personal an aim to see L&T also having an institution where you guys will train young grads in the coming years, because industries will need young grads and young talent in the course of year, because as I mentioned, we are going towards a boom of manufacturing. More human resources, more skilled workforce required. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah. We will have any other question from the audience.
Pranav Satyanath, work on defense and space policy issues at the Council for Strategic and Defense Research. My questions to all panelists. We have spoken extensively about an ecosystem and government procurement and how do you bring all this together. But over the conversation over space policy, what we don't think about is how India envisions itself as a space power, let's say in 2035 or 2040. And to be a space power, you need a space strategy. So in your respective roles, what do you think? Do you think a space strategy is necessary for India? And what shape should a space strategy take?
I didn't really get you. What is that you said? Is it necessary?
Yeah, a space strategy. That is how India as a country sees itself as a space power, so that it brings all these elements together, the ecosystem, the knowledge base, procurement.
I guess it will happen over the course of time, because it is necessary. Without strategy, it is difficult. Any of the panelists would like to add, they can add. I think it is necessary.
What they want is, what is our opinion about the strategy for the next 5 years, right?
Yes.
I don't know, because I don't think it can be just... Dr. Sushmita Mohanty, please. Yeah.
I think I'm going to play the generational bridge here. I think what Pranav is asking, Dr. Hegde, it's a very important question. If you look at the latest Space Policy 2023, Samit, you're the only person who doesn't know me. I think the rest of the panelists know who I am. I think what he's trying to say is a very valid point. If you look at the national space policy, even of fledgling space countries like Australia or New Zealand or Switzerland, their space policy also has a vision for the future, for the next 50 years, 100 years. So our space policy is fairly limited, if you look at the 2023 version, on the new space ecosystem. So I think that kind of contextualizes the question, and I think that's a very valid point. We need a roadmap for the next 10. I think Samit talked about it a bit.
Yeah, I fully agree, because yes, vision comes first, then strategy, then policy, then the instruments to make it work, everything will come. Yes, I agree that the policy is brief, but what we understand is from in space, formally, informally we hear is, each of the sections will be elaborated. It will come, because how government will put in place step by step, I am not aware. I don't think anyone is aware, because that info has not come in public domain today. So I think it will come out. Because definitely, before the aspirant industries step in more and sink more and more their money, more of their money and time, I think they will demand for it. It will happen. My guess is it will happen, yeah. Any other question? Oh, yeah.
Hello. I'm Rajiv Kumar. I have a small query. India has recently joined the Artemis Accord. And my query is that how is this going to help in our missions like Chandrayaan mission or Gaganyaan mission and even future missions? This is very specific because we are becoming competitor to these countries who are part of this accord. Second thing, will this accord will be able to help our indigenous manufacturing in satellite sector?
Let me see if I can respond to that. So, first and foremost, we need to understand that India very clearly has its own space strategy, number one. Number two, it also has its own strategy to moon and beyond. I mean, its own Indian space station, moon and beyond. The second thing which I wanted to, maybe I'm not in agreement with you, because I don't think there is competition among countries. It's not that you are running a race and you would lose out. But there is no losing out here, because maybe there is the early bird gets the bigger worm, but there is plenty of that. So I don't think today is a time for looking at saying that countries are competing, but I think today is a real time where countries need to collaborate. And probably the Artemis Accord is one such where it kind of lays down a generic principles and rules and values about trying to be a little bit more clear in the intentions, transparent, and make the whole thing sustainable. We'll see how this whole thing goes about. It's something which is new, and India is not the only signatory. I mean, the Artemis Accord would anyway go ahead with or without India becoming a signatory to that, and having been that, now it is in the interest of India and Indian industry to really see what we make the best out of it. I think we need to look at it far more positively. Thanks.
I fully subscribe to whatever Mr. Laxmesh said. See, if you just go through the history of Indian space program, we have learned and gained a lot out of collaborations, partnerships, goodwills, from day one of Indian space program. India has had collaborations, and we have gained a lot, whether it is, starting from site experiment onwards, site experiment to sounding rocket to whatever, wherever we are. In fact, one of the recent interactions with the chairman in space, I made a remark that, FDI was being discussed, FDI for space sector. I told we need FDI, okay, we may seek, but we also need FTI, foreign technology infusion, FTI, into our activity. That is necessary. Otherwise, we will be nowhere in the global market, unless our technology is contemporary. So I think it's 1:20 already. I will request from this side, Samit, any one last comment from the panelists? One question? Yeah, please. I assumed no questions. Okay, sorry for that.
I am Group Captain P.V. Singh. I have one small suggestion and a question. Firstly, I want to compliment the panel for bringing out the issues and the requirement on the part of government in terms of policies and standards, what is lacking or what needs to be done. My small suggestion is that I want to tell the panel and the space industry that there is no dearth of aerospace engineers in this country. A large number of aerospace engineers are being produced by Indian Air Force since 50s and 60s. They are well familiar with the whatever space technology you talk about, whether it is jet engines or it is the space electronics. So the industry does not have to look anywhere to where they need the technology providers or the people who can help you help in your business. My small question to the panel is that while you have formulated the general rules and policies on the part of government, what are the steps government can take to encourage the small scale industries? How they can participate into this space industry, which is a new field for the private industry, particularly those who are into other businesses and they want to diversify into space industry. Thank you.
Let me quickly respond to the, we take your suggestion, but very important, let me address the last part of it. Now, one of the very important, the program that we have taken up of, productionization of the PSLV, the purchase order itself says productionization, which is fundamentally looking at a launch vehicle not as an assimilation of technologies, but as a product. Now, if I were to go ahead with looking at the various components and the various players that are there, it would be more than 500 organizations that I will have to engage with, which means fundamentally there are tier 1s, tier 2s, and tier 3s and tier 4s. One of the things that we are trying to bring about a change in this is to create this tierized, not directly engage with all those 400, 500 people at component level, but create this structure. And certainly lots of them are at MSME level. By creating the existing value chain which was created, and qualified by ISRO, we are able to also add to it. Of course, it takes enormous amount of qualification and things like that. And it's going to take its own time. But it is essential that we build that addition and alternate sources at every of these levels. Third and very essential is there are lots of people who are in the precision high-end technology level, wherein which space today can become one more revenue stream for them. Space cannot be the driving revenue stream for at least for some more years, for even some startup. But yes, it can be one more. Until probably the space economy becomes $1 trillion and things like that. So today it is essential, and my suggestion to all the MSMEs is to try to become part of the ecosystem, which is driven in a tierized structure. That's my suggestion. Thanks.
You want to close off? For starters, we are hiring 3,000 engineers. So open offer to the industry. Anybody has a reference, please pass it on to us, number one. Number two, you said MSMEs. So we have developed supply chain of more than 150 companies, over the last 25 years. We will continue to develop more such startup companies and then mature them to the process to make them fully functional companies, They were SMEs, they have become MSMEs now. Probably in the next decade or so, they'll become large companies. That's number two.
Excellent.
Third point is, demand is important. All I'll say is that this sector will evolve. Let's not be in a hurry to reach somewhere. This is a journey. It will take many, many more years for India to figure out what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? He talked about strategy. India has a basic strategy in mind, right? But that is not the end goal. End goal, there won't be an end goal. There will be a journey, what we want to do. This sector will evolve. Like the defense sector, which has evolved in the last 25 years, defense sector today, what it is, was not what it was 25 years ago. There was practically only DPSUs who were manufacturing in the country. Today, a whole lot of private sector companies are into the aerospace defense manufacturing, right? Similarly, there are companies who are wanting to diversify into space sector. They may be into automobile industries who have graduated from automobiles to defense sector. There could be defense companies who are suppliers to many of us who would want to venture into space sector. As I said, the gestation period is long. Because the gestation period is long, there has to be a constant cash flow from some other of their businesses. As he mentioned, that relying solely on the space sector for revenue may or may not work out in the immediate future. But they can start the journey now and look at the low-hanging fruits and then look at larger programs. I think that's the journey that we have to look at and work with the Indian industry, the startup ecosystem, to get them through the maturity curve so that they are able to become mainstream companies in the space sector. That's all I have to say.
I think since we are already up with the time, I think we had a good session thanks to our distinguished panelists, all the distinguished participants. But most of the deliberations we kept to the upstream activity of the space ecosystem. You know, satellites, manufacturing, launching. See, upstream activity in the whole space economy is less than 20-25%. So, really speaking, while policy is trying to address today, or what we discussed is kind of top-down kind of visualization of the ecosystem, it is also important that there should be bottom-up. You know, all the various developmental sectors in the country, they can also raise their own demand. Suppose the HRD ministry, like defense is today asking for ISR capability from space, and defense is definitely going to pay, and they have been paying actually. More than 7,000-8,000 crores already defense has invested on specific space projects. Same way, if education sector needs, MHRD can come up, you know, either a set of privately owned satellites, private launches. So what we expect is the demand should keep coming from the bottom also, from the user segment also. So only then the ecosystem is complete. Otherwise, top-down or thrusting it down all the time is not a healthy practice for the ecosystem and the whole activity to grow. I think with these remarks, I thank everybody once again. Thank you so much. Time for lunch. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. May I request our eminent panelists to kindly come together for a group photograph. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we now break for lunch. We have a small announcement for all the startups. The Startup and Investors Meetup, powered by Invest India and SIA-INDIA, is being organized from 3:50 p.m. onwards in Regency Ballroom 3. All the startups are requested to assemble there at the tea break time from 3:50 p.m. But now we would like to invite you all to join us for lunch. All our distinguished VIPs and speakers to join us here at the backside at the Oval, and all other delegates are invited to join us for lunch at the Regency Ballroom. Thank you. The next session will commence. Ladies and gentlemen, the next session will commence at 2:30. I request everybody to be seated back in time. Thank you.